The children who once captivated America vanished from Hollywood as if they had never existed. The applause that once lifted them dimmed as quickly as a childhood swallowed by the lights, where growing up was sometimes a sentence. Today, we will open the door on 20 vanished destinies, each with its own path, its own secret, its own reason Hollywood never wanted to mention again. Hollywood has a cruel truth: children are worshipped like miracles, but when they grow up, they are discarded like broken toys. The haunting question is why 4 faces once loved by the whole country were swept off the screen so fast no one noticed. In this section, the secrets behind the glitter will gradually be revealed. Bobby Driscoll is the harshest example of how puberty can destroy an empire built on a child's smile. From the boy who voiced Peter Pan and made millions believe in magic, Bobby entered adolescence with a changed face, acne, and an aura no longer fitting Disney's desired image. Without warning, Walt Disney terminated his contract, turning the boy who had been a studio symbol into an unemployed 16-year-old. Hollywood's doors closed, and Bobby slid into addiction as if trying to find again the place that once accepted him. When he was found dead in an abandoned building in New York, with no ID, no relatives, no one to claim him, Bobby was buried in an unmarked grave. The child who once flew across the screen disappeared in real life in the coldest manner this industry can produce. Scotty Beckett entered the business with a mischievous smile that enchanted audiences in The Little Rascals. But behind that cleverness was a soul abandoned after his father's death. Hollywood wanted him to stay cheerful forever, while Scotty wrestled with growing sorrow. As he matured, he failed to find fitting roles, fell into alcohol, drugs, and notorious incidents. Each attempt at a comeback ended in a worse scandal than the last. Finally, Scotty turned up in a nursing home after a mysterious assault. 2 days later he was found dead. An ambiguous end, unexplained, as if Hollywood had long since stopped caring about his existence. Jay North carried a different wound. He wasn't forgotten by Hollywood so much as crushed by it from within. In Dennis the Menace, Jay was the mischievous American boy everyone wanted as a son. But behind the smile were shoots controlled by an overbearing guardian, backstage threats, and the terror that a single flubbed line might be punished at home. As he grew, Jay became trapped by the image of Dennis, unable to escape the role that had defined his childhood. Acting closed its doors, and Jay sank into the depression of someone who had lived a life that wasn't his. Leaving Hollywood, Jay worked in prisons, seeking peace where no one cared who he had been. A famous childhood, but never a real childhood. Tommy Rettig, the boy associated with Lassie, bore the loneliness of a child thrust too early into an adult world. Audiences saw him with the legendary dog, but few knew Tommy was constantly pressured to be perfect, always cute, always obedient, the boy the brand demanded. Growing up, Tommy felt himself vanish under the weight of a pre-made image. Unable to find suitable roles and not seen as a true actor, Tommy wandered for years, desperate between old expectations and a reality with no place for him. Returning to ordinary life, Tommy chose programming work and moved far from Hollywood, as someone leaves a place that deeply hurt them. 4 stories, 4 different fates, but the same truth: Hollywood loves children, but it never loves the adults those children become. What the audience sees is light, what they don't see are the wounds that light leaves behind. Some stars did not fade from Hollywood, they were ripped from the stage before they had time to understand they had grown up. The haunting question is what stopped 2 blazing talents when their futures were still unfolding. In this section, their final moments will appear like warnings no one wanted to hear. Brandon DeWilde entered film history with a single line, a voice that cut the audience's breath in the classic Shane. At 11, he achieved what many lifelong adult actors never do: he made a theater believe that longing could tear the air. Brandon grew more handsome, acted better, and unlike many child actors, he didn't remain trapped in an old image. Directors saw in him a rare artistic personality, a gaze both youthful and razor-sharp, as if he understood life more deeply than his years. But just as his career was poised to mature, his life was cut short in a cold collision of metal and fate. One evening in Colorado, the car he was driving crashed into a stationary construction truck. Minutes later, the boy who had made America weep for a cowboy had no more chance to continue. At 30, on the brink of a promising future, Brandon disappeared from life so abruptly Hollywood could hardly accept it as truth. Bobby Driscoll's story repeats a tragedy already familiar from before, but it bears retelling because it shows the fragility of childhood stardom. Bobby had been a Disney icon, the voice of Peter Pan, the boy who made the world believe in magic. But when his career collapsed, Bobby slid into a life without support. From failed treatments to fruitless attempts to restart a life no one remembered, Bobby lived a prolonged vanishing before he truly disappeared. The cruelest fact was not that he died at 31, but the way he left the world, nameless, with no relatives, with no one to claim his body. The children who had laughed watching Peter Pan had no idea that off-screen, that boy had fallen long before. Two destinies, one common point: they did not choose to leave Hollywood. Their lives were cut short. Pulled down from the lights as if an invisible hand decided when they should no longer shine. Looking back at these stories, one understands that some stars do not fade due to time, they fade because the time allotted them runs out. Some stars did not disappear because Hollywood rejected them, but because they themselves extinguished the lights. The question the world asks is what led four once lauded faces to deliberately step away from the stage, to give up what many others would sacrifice everything to keep. In this section, those quiet reasons will be revealed. Margaret O'Brien was once MGM's little treasure, with tearful eyes and the power to hush an audience with a glance. Acting alongside Judy Garland in Meet Me in St. Louis, Margaret wasn't just a talented child actor, she proved that children could make real art. But Margaret understood earlier than most that the spotlight is not always the place to grow. In adolescence, she did not chase the rare roles to cling to her career like many peers. She chose school, family, and a normal rhythm that Hollywood could not provide. Margaret married, raised children, acted only when she wished, and never allowed the industry to control her life. In later years, whenever she appeared at classic film events, she kept the gentle smile of someone who knew she had already won. She had won by not needing Hollywood to prove her worth. In her 80s, she lived as she had decided long ago, without regret, without chasing an expired glamour. Claude Jarman Jr. is an even more remarkable case because Hollywood did not push him away. After brilliant success in The Yearling, Claude had every opportunity to become a major star. Yet when he saw that subsequent roles weren't fitting, he halted the path everyone assumed he would walk. He returned to Tennessee to finish high school, then attended Vanderbilt University, stepping away from film to find a real life. What earns respect is not that he left acting, but that he transformed his love of cinema into more meaningful work. As director of the San Francisco International Film Festival, he was no longer the child before the camera, but the person supporting new stories and new talents. Claude proved that leaving Hollywood is not an end, sometimes it's the start of a greater role. No one on this list staged a more dramatic exit than Deanna Durbin. She was not merely famous, she rescued an entire studio from crisis. With a crystalline voice and an innocent image, she had an appeal equal to any major star of her time. At 21, Deanna was among the highest-paid women in America. Then, at the height everyone envied, she announced her retirement. No gossip, no scandal, just an absolute decision. Deanna moved to France, married, and lived 64 years away from the public eye. She refused every interview and every attempt to lure her back to the stage. What puzzled Hollywood was the simplicity of her reason: she had never been happy in the profession. The spotlight had suffocated her, the constructed image forced her to live as someone else. Deanna left to find herself, and in the remainder of her life she lived exactly as she once said: happiness does not require an audience. Gloria Jean is a softer but poignant example that the timing of departure can matter more than staying. She was the bright, clear-voiced singer Universal hoped would follow Deanna Durbin. But when tastes changed and musical films fell out of favor, Gloria realized her future no longer shone. Rather than clinging on with small roles just to keep a name, she turned toward a different path. Gloria found steady work, raised children, and built a life free of the pressure to impress. In rare interviews, she never blamed Hollywood or lamented her career. She simply said that when the time came to leave, she left. A seemingly simple sentence, but one that reveals a clarity few child actors possess. 4 stories, 4 different turns, but a shared point: they walked away from Hollywood not because of failure, but because they understood they needed a real life. For them, the stage lights were not the ultimate goal, only a beautiful chapter not meant to be kept. Looking back, those who left early often turned out to live the fullest lives. Some stars left Hollywood not to disappear but to begin life anew. The question that astonished everyone was what enabled 4 faces, once boxed in childhood, to find a rebirth stronger and more enduring than the stage lights. In this section, their spectacular resurrections will be revealed one by one. Shirley Temple is the brightest proof that childhood talent need not persist to become a legacy. As a child, Shirley was the world's biggest star, the little girl who lifted America's spirit during the Great Depression. With ringlet curls and sparkling steps, she carried the light a nation clung to. But when adolescence arrived, audiences and tastes shifted, roles for her dwindled. What Shirley did next was something few imagined. She left the screen, raised children, and re-emerged not in film but in diplomacy. Shirley served as U.S. ambassador to Ghana and later to Czechoslovakia, representing her country during some of Europe's tensest moments. She negotiated with international leaders and stood amid important transfers of power. No longer the curly-haired girl on screen, Shirley became a symbol of calm and public service. Greater still, she rewrote her own legacy by will, not by lights. Freddie Bartholomew's path was different but equally powerful. As a child he was MGM's little aristocrat, playing polite, intelligent boys in classic films. But behind that polished persona lay family tragedy. Freddie's parents and aunt locked into bitter legal battles over control of his earnings. When adolescence came, roles dried up and his money disappeared into lawyers' hands. Freddie could have been another example of a child star collapsing when fortune and fame left. Instead, he rebuilt himself through advertising, starting from the lowest rungs and gradually becoming a respected creative director. Colleagues later said they had no idea the man sitting beside them had once been a film star. Freddie's triumph was to be respected for the present, not the past. Kevin Corcoran, familiar to Disney audiences for playful boy roles, chose a quiet yet solid path. As an adult he did not cling to acting, he recognized his camera-facing childhood had fulfilled its mission. He moved behind the scenes, becoming an assistant director, then director, and finally a producer for successful television shows. His years off camera outlasted his on-screen career, and colleagues praised his discipline, subtlety, and the understanding of child actors that only a former child performer could have. Kevin did not need fame to exist. He built a career on real skill, responsibility, and genuine joy in his work. Beverly Washburn is the gentlest example in this chapter, no less meaningful. She neither fell into scandal nor pursued a desperate comeback. Beverly quietly left Hollywood when she realized her roles had run their course. She chose privacy, attended events when she wished, and wrote memoirs to preserve sweet memories without embellishment or complaint. In old age, she was welcomed at classic film gatherings, not because she was still famous, but because she carried the peace of someone who had understood life's value. 4 journeys, 4 different continuations, but they converge on one truth: they did not allow the past to imprison the future. For them, the stage lights were only an opening chapter. What determined fate was not old glamour but the ability to adapt, to find new directions, and to build the life they truly wanted. Some stars did not wait for Hollywood to forget them, they chose to vanish as an act of self-preservation. The puzzling question is why 3 faces once recognized around the world decided to live in silence so complete that their old traces were nearly erased. In this section, their chosen disappearances will appear with reasons gentler than any tragedy. Martin Stevens haunted audiences in classic horror films, where a child's innocent exterior masked a chilling menace. In Village of the Damned and the Innocents, Martin did more than act. He created an obsession that made many believe Hollywood would firmly hold him for sharper roles. But Martin understood his place. He was a child acting, not someone building a lifelong career. When adolescence came, he simply stepped away from sets, returned to school, and lived a life free of showbiz traces. For decades no one knew where Martin was, what he did, or even whether he was still alive. That absolute silence was not a sign of tragedy, but the choice of someone who refused to let the lights decide his future. In recent years, when he appeared in a few retrospective interviews, Martin spoke of the past as a small chapter, no more. What commands respect is not his acting talent, but his calm in leaving. John Provost, the boy Timmy in Lassie, took a quieter but equally determined path. Appearing with the nation's most famous dog, John became a television icon, receiving thousands of letters weekly. But as he grew, he no longer fit the child roles audiences expected. Rather than awkwardly transition into scarce adult parts, he chose to stop. John went to college, then entered a career in real estate, a field unrelated to film. He succeeded, married, and built a steady life, no scandal, no pressure, no attempts to revive past glory. When asked about Lassie, John spoke with respect but no regret. For him, fame mattered less than happiness and freedom. That ordinary life, rather than celebrity, became the true aim. Bonita Granville offers another variant of disappearance. She did not leave Hollywood entirely but stepped out of the spotlight to take control behind it. As a young woman she stunned audiences as the sharp, intelligent Nancy Drew. But as she matured, she declined to pursue narrowing roles. Bonita married a producer and, together with her husband, built a powerful entertainment company. She helped shape the Lassie brand into a decades-long franchise. No longer in front of the camera, her power lay in production decisions, business strategy, and an understanding of audiences deeper than many who had watched her act. She left the detective role to become an executive, an achievement few reach. When she died, her legacy was not the childhood image on film but the television empire she helped create. 3 stars, 3 disappearances, but none collapsed. They chose silence to protect the private parts of their lives Hollywood couldn't touch. In a world where people always want more access, more knowledge, their choice shows that vanishing is sometimes not an end. Sometimes, it is victory. 20 journeys appear as 20 mirrors reflecting the true cost of glory. There are stolen childhoods, recoveries, and continuations, those who vanish into silence, and souls who find new heights beyond the limits Hollywood imposes. They do not share one fate, but they share one truth: early fame always comes with conditions children never choose. These stories remind us that Hollywood does not nurture childhood, it consumes it. It loves cuteness, innocence, and wonder, but it has no idea what to do with the children after they grow up. Thus, disappearance is sometimes not failure but the only way to keep the part of life not yet swept away. Looking back at these 20 destinies, viewers cannot help but ask, which of them haunts us most? The Peter Pan boy who died alone? The curly-haired angel who became a diplomat? Those who quietly left to find freedom? And more importantly, has the system really changed today, or does Hollywood continue to recreate similar stories in the next generation? Finally, when the stage lights go out and the applause remains only a memory, what remains is not fame but the life they wrote for themselves when cameras were no longer watching. Off camera, where no script dictates the lines, each of them found a private path. And sometimes, those paths are the stories most worth telling.